present from the count we just did. So I will call the regular meeting of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District to order. And will you please do a roll call?
Manager Lowe. Manager Schmaltz.
Here.
Manager Baki.
Here.
Manager Takes.
Here.
President Anderson.
Here. All right, thank you. The first order of business is to call the, setting of the meeting agenda. And do we have any changes?
Madam President.
Okay, very good. Anything from the board? All right, let's move on then. New business?
Do we have to accept the meeting agenda?
I don't think so. Do we?
There were no changes.
No changes, so we don't. Okay, sorry.
Yes. There should be a approval of the agenda.
Oh,
Okay, I move to accept the agenda as presented.
okay, thank you. Is there a second?
No second.
Thank you. Okay, roll call.
All right, Manager Schmaltz.
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Manager Takes.
Aye.
President Anderson.
Aye. Okay, under new business, we have 2024 water monitoring report and presentation.
President Manager, are you leading us on?
Sure.
I know playing on as well. I was trying to get in there. He's been involved with Dr. Wilkinson has been leading.
Blaine is also here.
Yes, there you go.
Okay. Madam President and managers, we have posted the draft of the 2024 water monitoring report. I also posted a longer form presentation recording for viewing in the board packet yesterday, so you can review both of those. I've also prepared a brief overview presentation if you would like to see that. I will share my screen. So this presentation gives the highlights of that report, and then the longer presentation kind of goes through each lake organized by management district. To try to do a little bit different, kind of highlighting the specifics of each lake and categorizing it so people can tune in when they to the lakes that they're interested in. But this is kind of the highlights for the overall district view for you all to kind of, for the board to learn about from a district-wide standpoint. So we're going to talk about introduction to the monitoring, the 2024 climate trends, and then give the highlights for the lake monitoring, stream monitoring, and BMP effectiveness, and then overall conclusions from the report.
Can I just ask a question? This is the same one you had up on the website, right?
This is a different one.
Oh, it is?
This is just the highlights, but you can ask questions about the other one.
No, I was just wondering if has everybody seen the presentation?
I haven't seen it.
Okay,
So this is kind of the highlights of that.
I thought we could move ahead with questions or something,
Sure.
but we won't. Let's go ahead.
Okay, so in 2024, we monitored 11 lakes for our routine monitoring program, and then 6 of those lakes, we also looked at internal loading assessment. So that's bottom water samples, and also looking at stratification and other factors that looked at internal loading processes. And then we also monitored our 6 long-term stream sites for water quality and flow for event-based sampling. And then we had 2 BMP effectiveness sites, looking at the performance of those new BMPs over the season. So one of the biggest drivers for the 2024 water quality was our precipitation and temperature conditions. So the climate trends kind of drove a lot of the water quality trends in 2024. 2024 was a wet year preceded by a warm winter, and it was also preceded by 4 years of really dry summers. The spring and summer months were also very wet, and then the end of the growing season was dry. This led to high runoff conditions of contaminants that had built up in the landscape during prior years and transported a lot of load to our downstream water bodies. it's also important to look at the temperature. So we had a warm winter that came into a warm spring and then extended into a warm fall. So this extended the growing season essentially for favorable conditions for algae blooms and plant growth. And so we kind of had a very long season for those plants and algae to start growing early and kind of anticipate that load as it was coming in the spring. So that's why we saw some high chlorophyll concentration in some of the lakes. This is a table that kind of goes through the lake trend, the lake highlights for each of these. This is including the conclusion of the report, but the table looks at the different lakes, the 5-year water quality averages compared to the state standard, the 5-year water quality averages compared to the district standards, and then the 5-year water quality averages compared to the 10-year average. And then if 2024 water quality seasonal averages were meeting the standard. So check mark means that all the water quality parameters, TP, SECI, and chlorophyll met those conditions. And then if there's individual parameters in the cell, that means that those are meeting each of those qualities. So all of the lakes that we looked at besides Nielsen were the 5-year average was at least meeting one of the state standards for water quality. Bone Lake, Comfort Lake, Forest Lake West, Little Comfort, Keewatin School, and Shields were meeting the 5-year averages, meeting all of the parameters for the state standard. This next plot also looks at the 5-year water quality averages meeting district standards, and Forest Lake East School and Shields and Keewatin are all meeting the district goals for the 5-year average. Bone and Comfort are meeting the goals for total phosphorus, as well as Forest Lake West, and then Moody is meeting the district goals for SECI. Forest Lake Middle and Little Comfort are not meeting any of the district 5-year goals. However, we have active water quality improvement projects on both of those, with the alum treatment continuing, and then also the iron enhanced sand filter that has been approved to be installed. And we also are looking into diagnostic monitoring on Little Comfort to make improvements as well. All of the lakes showed improved or equal water quality, comparing the 5-year average to the 10-year average, which is good. So long-term, we're having favorable trends. However, as I said, 2024 was a difficult year for water quality, but all of the lakes, except for Nielsen, were meeting at least one of the water quality standards. And I'll kind of talk about some trends that we're noticing among why some lakes are meeting for some of these parameters and some are not, but Forest Lake West and Keewatin were meeting for all water quality standards in 2024. So the reason why we're seeing some kind of different responses to these high loading is really driven by lake dynamics, looking at small lakes versus large lakes. So the influence of that wet spring, that phosphorus loading was much more prevalent in lakes with smaller surface areas like Shields, Moody, School, and Little Comfort. These small surface areas, lakes were much more responsive to high TP concentrations throughout the summer, especially in those spring months. So you can kind of follow the TP trends with the precipitation. And whereas the larger lakes were still meeting a lot of their water quality goals in terms of TP. And so this is a pretty general lake limnological phenomenon where these larger lakes have a greater volume to absorb some of the extra loading due to dilution, and also more stable conditions within larger lakes. However, it is interesting to note that although like the TP was meeting the standard in these larger lakes, these larger lakes were experiencing more of the algae blooms in the shallower SECI. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. It could be due primarily to the differences in the phytoplankton community. All we can tell from the chlorophyll is that's a signature or a measure of the amount of pigment in the water, but it doesn't tell us what kind of algae are there. And different types of algae, as I kind of showed in this example plot, respond to nutrients in different ways. And so it could be interesting to kind of understand those dynamics a little bit better if this continues to be a trend. Like I said, 2024 represents 1 year of data, and so we just need to keep that in context as we move forward, but it was kind of an interesting trend that we identified when we were looking at all of this data, that the chlorophyll seemed to be not as peaky in these smaller lakes that have higher phosphorus, but in these larger lakes, the algae seemed to be responding to pulses of lower amounts of phosphorus.
Can I just make an observation, because I've noticed over the years that the 3 lakes at Forest Lake operate differently. And so,
Yes.
while you said these are larger lakes, they did respond pretty aggressively. And now I didn't look at the little lakes, but for example, between 23 and 24. East Lake had, a phosphorus level of 33 and 17 and 23 and 33 and 24. So there was 100% increase in that and 100% increase in the middle lake on their phosphorus.
Mhm.
The corresponding chlorophyll went up 300% and 400%. So I would say that's not a lackadaisical reaction. That's
No,
a big
they
reaction.
had a big reaction.
And then on the water clarity then, or the depth went down both 42%.
Mhm.
But if you look at West, which has a better water quality, the change in phosphorus was only up 10% instead of 100%. And the change in chlorophyll was only up 10% instead of 300 or 400%. And the water clarity went down 12%. So for some reason, if you look back across the history of Forest Lake, Lake 3, it's much more constrained and has a much smaller deviation to changes.
Mhm.
So I don't know what we have, and maybe it's the diatoms. I was wondering what that was.
Yeah.
So maybe it's that. So I would encourage that we maybe get a better handle on that, because we have to have an explanation for the public when we have a big burst like that. They're gonna say, oh, you guys really don't have control of it. We have to have some rational explanation of that.
Well, it would be important to equate that to similar rainfalls, though, precipitation level years. Because Forest Lake, middle and the west basin, you call it, or third basin, they're fairly shallow. And so, and they've got a lot, especially Lake 2 or second basin, has a lot of plant material. So I just think, when you've got that kind of big flush happening, you're bringing more in than what's already there. And if it's depending upon the quantity, it could rise that much. So if you do that, just.
Well,
make
they're
sure
all
that-
connected. That's the point I'm trying to.
Well,
and so
I
that's-
know you are,
yeah.
but I'm talking about that level of precipitation that's coming down. It's not just what's coming off of the melt, from the snow. It's what's actually coming down from on top. And so, so you gotta use a equalization process so that you're not misjudging what's happening. And maybe that's the way they respond every time it rains heavy. I don't know. That would be interesting to find out, though.
Yeah, we did make some comparisons in the report about 2019, which had a similar
Okay.
precipitation year. However, those antecedent conditions or those, dry years preceding that were not the same in 2019. So this is kind of a higher load year because of not only what happened this year, but happened the previous couple of years,
Sure.
which led to kind of that buildup of
The
those
drought.
materials. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
okay.
wasn't the case in 2019.
Mhm.
However, we did look at some 2019 data to kind of make those comparisons,
Mhm.
and it really depended on the lake, how much or how little comparable those conditions are. But
That's
it's
what-
something to,
Mhm.
but this is something that's on my radar primarily because I do love algae, but
Mhm.
also, those dynamics are very interesting to me because there were some pretty high chlorophyll.
Yeah, well, one
concentrations.
difference, of course, between Middle Lake and East and West is that the orthophosphate in the bottom is present in the first two, and the East it's not.
Yes,
And I think if you look at your graphs that you put together, you had the orthophosphate plotted, and you can see that definitely had an impact on what happened in those lakes.
especially on East, it did. There was a breakdown of stratification that happened on East that did lead to some orthophosphate mixing. However, during that period, it was also a peak that was observed, in
middle
the,
too.
yeah, in the
But it was lower.
surface. Yeah, so,
So it almost makes you think you should be treating Lake 3 rather than I mean, Lake 3 rather than Lake 2, but.
well, Lake Two had much higher concentrations than
okay.
that. Lake Two had a maximum pre-treatment of 2,000, I think, and this,
Yeah.
I think. East only got up to, I mean, it still was very high. And it could be a good candidate in the future if we're still seeing these issues. But it was, I think it's only about 60% of that.
It's National Weather Wet Day.
Yeah, that's right. They have two sirens, one at one, I guess one at.
Well, this is why, this has always been my favorite report. Because you can see some trends. And as Steve was mentioning, it's really important for the public to remember that lakes, are the basin that collects everything in their sub-watershed. And it's dynamic. I mean, it's not gonna be the same every year. It has all these weather and precipitation inputs but it's important for them to understand that as we go along. So this report always pulls those out. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, so one of the things that we're gonna talk about and need to keep looking at is Shields Lake. Shields Lake showed really high TP and chlorophyll concentrations above the standard throughout the growing season. We also are looking at the the bottom water phosphorus on Shields Lake. It did receive an alum treatment several years ago. That alum treatment is still, showing a reduction for pre-treatment conditions, but it has increased pretty significantly since 2023. So it's something that we're recommending investigating a little bit further. I will say though, Shields Lake during that time of high chlorophyll and TP during that growing season was stratified, and so that bottom phosphorus was not having an influence on the surface water. What we believe is driving that surface water is, we did take one grab sample in the middle of July, which showed really high phosphorus concentrations coming in the inlet. So what we're gonna do is, and this is kind of what that DIY monitoring is made for, is look at, employ those DIY sensors throughout that sub-watershed to try to understand if there were some blowout conditions that happened. There has been some changes in that neighborhood, and some of that some of the stormwater ponds are getting older. So they're gonna deploy those, and then we're gonna monitor the data and verify with grab samples if they start to get high, depending on what the weather looks like for 2024. So obviously, we want to understand what's going on in Shields Lake, and so we're kind of gonna look at both external and internal loads there. To some good news, you have all already seen these results, but the Forest Lake Middle alum treatment, we did have the first dose in September 2023, and then we have been monitoring since then, and we did see a significant reduction in that bottom phosphorus concentrations, and then verified them with sediment cores, which showed a 60% decrease in the release rate. So favorable conditions there, and we're doing the second treatment in fall.
Is that a natural picture, or did you use a filter to get that blue?
That
That's
no,
good.
that is a natural picture.
That's spectacular.
The alum is white,
Mhm.
and so when it's in the water as it's settling down, that the light reflects off of it, and it looks like a Caribbean sort of situation, because in the Caribbean they have white sands and you're seeing that reflection, so you're seeing the reflection from the white flocks from the alum, but it is like striking when you observe it.
Always use that photo for marketing.
And then another good news, we also looked at the Comfort and Little Comfort chloride conditions in 2023. If you'll remember, high chloride concentrations were observed from the chlorophyll profiles from the sonde, which we were a little bit suspicious of, because it didn't look like it was a natural condition. So we wanted to verify those. So we did have them collect grab samples to confirm the concentrations, and all of those grab samples were very low, consistently low, and similar to the lakes around them. So were those 2023 exceedances, were likely due to interference with those probes making falsely elevated concentrations. Those probes are a recommended way to monitor chloride. It's just that there are some instances of different constituents in the water column that can interfere with those readings, and that's probably what's happening. So we're gonna continue to collect those grab samples just to verify that again. Now I'm gonna talk about recommendations, so continue on the path of the monitoring, program in the 10-year monitoring plan. Continue to collect those bottom water samples in Comfort East and Middle and Little Comfort, Moody and Shields to further evaluate, internal loading. We're gonna continue to collect those chloride grab samples. We did suggest to do follow-up cores to evaluate the internal loading from Moody and Shield, since we have seen some increases in bottom phosphorus since those alum treatments have been done. And what those sediment cores can do is allow us to look at what has happened to the aluminum bound layer, if it's been covered by something, if it's been disturbed, if it's not as high as we would have expected. And then also look at the release rates to see if they have significantly decreased since the last alum treatment. Also, as I talked about, conduct those DIY diagnostic monitoring for the Shield Lake subwatershed, coupled with those grab samples and flow measuring, as we see how those signatures look. And then just a reminder, Nielsen Lake was included in this round because the MPCA reached out and wanted to know if it should be included on their list for TMDL development that the MPCA would do. So from the 2024 results, Nielsen Lake's condition still supports the nutrient impairment, and so the MPCA should consider it in the queue. The conclusions from the stream data. So in 2024, as I talked about, the peak flows were observed in spring and there was really high precipitation in June. And then there were some late summer driven events. We had actually a really wet August as well. And those peak flows led to high TP and phosphorus loads because of all of those materials that have built up in the watershed from droughts. I will say that TP and TSS loads were measured in 2024 were less than those measured in the most recent wet year 2019, which we talked about for the Comfort Lake Inlet and the Little Comfort Inlet. They were a little bit higher at the Forest Lake outlet. And then, as we said, this is probably due to load reductions that have been implemented in the watershed, so that's good. In general, nitrogen levels were low. There were no chloride exceedances. So those were all good and kind of what we've seen in the past as well. I did want to note here, we did see some possibly anomalous data in the TP and TSS concentrations for Comfort and Bone outlets. This was driven by 3 really high sample dates that were higher than the rest of the season and also much higher than what was in the lake itself. And we believe those need another year to be corroborated. It may have been from some erosion right near the outlet, but that wasn't observed. We looked back through all of our notes from the sampling, and sometimes with these auto samplers, the sample can suck up additional sediments that aren't represented into what's actually flowing out. And so we want to corroborate those before we make any conclusions about any large loads coming from the outlet. Because those seemed pretty anomalous compared to the other indicators that we could look at, which is why it's really important to have a large data set, which you all have. The recommendations for stream monitoring are continue to have our long-term sites to provide our data-driven watershed management. And then we are still looking at refining telemetry to make sampling more efficient, so we can kind of have an idea of what the stream flow looks like before triggering and doing faster sample development. So we're continuing to look into options for that. Also good news with the BMP effectiveness, the iron enhanced sand filter is performing better than projected in terms of percentage removal for TP, TSS and orthophosphate. And just to kind of compare here, again, the loads coming into these were higher than in the feasibility study. But in 2024, the estimated removal was 147 pounds per year, and the feasibility study quoted 97 pounds. So that's a big, increase. And then the wetland restoration project is also performing better than projected for the TP removal efficiencies, 200 pounds versus 85 pounds. I will caveat this again, that the establishment of all of that vegetation acted like a sponge in this first year of having that wetland restoration. And these two are again on the docket for further effectiveness monitoring. But for the 2024 season, these BMPs were working really well. For the TSS removal for the wetland restoration, we got a 70% removal in the feasibility study. It said 73%, so we were close there, but a little bit.
And these
underperforming.
projects are where?
So this is the County Road 50 iron enhanced sand filter, and the other one. What?
I was just saying the top one.
Oh, yeah, the top one, and then the bottom one is the Sunrise River Highway 61 wetland restoration. And then I'll talk about overall conclusions. Although 2024 was a challenging year for lake water quality across the state, especially in central Minnesota, long-term averages still show an improvement and long-term trends are still favorable. Most of the lakes monitored in 2024 were still receiving a B or C grade. This is likely due to this wet spring and summer preceded by several dry years that led to high loads, deteriorated water quality. Like we said, there are some dynamics in these smaller lakes and how they work versus how the larger lakes are responding. This is something important to note that, there was no evidence that we had any large blowouts of our BMPs or any long-term maintenance issues with the BMPs. These high loads, in fact, the effective monitoring showed that, these management strategies are performing well. However, like 2024 only represents 1 year of data, and the district will continue its monitoring program to provide evidence-based adaptive management. So just wanted to keep caveating that there. And that's what I have for my highlights. Like I said, there's also a longer and more specific, lake-specific presentation that's online to review. That kind of goes over those lake sheets results.
Well, nice job. Anyone have any questions or comments? Steve, you had some questions? Or did you
I'll
ask?
wait for the other managers.
Okay, all right. Mr. Baki, anything from you?
I'm very impressed with the report. I agree with you, Manager Anderson. This is one of my favorite reports as well, that we get a lot of longitudinal data that can really show us what's going on and give us a better understanding of the work that we are approving as managers and the impact it seems to be making. So thank you for the nice job on the report.
Manager Taves?
Well, I'm just kind of zeroed in here looking up the data on our Moody Lake, which of course is dear to my heart. Thank you for the report, incredibly in depth, and I really appreciate that. It's an education every time this report comes out.
Just again, I encourage you to do the diatom work with the, the fact that might be what influence the changes we're seeing between lakes. That would be very helpful. And then, Emily, I was going to ask you, you had in your report, you were going to mention or ask for some recommendations for what we should recommend for trying to get them, the MCPV to take them off the impaired list. Are you going to cover that, or should we ask that question now?
That's later on.
Later on?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Just want to make sure we don't lose that.
Sure.
That's important, I think.
Okay.
Again, I thought it was an excellent report. I really like the fact that that orthophosphate, really opened my eyes in terms of what impact that can have. You know, on what the changes that you see in the water column, as you can't see, you don't understand it. So putting it on the graph allows you to correlate it directly almost. So that was a very insightful addition to the report. So I think it's great.
And just a couple of things from me. Again, I just want to underscore the water monitoring reports on comparatives for heavy rainfalls, I think will help us with our climate change, building that climate change resiliency plan that we have. And it also helps explain how damaging these heavy rainfalls can be. And as some factor of the society doesn't want to believe that this is happening, our science can actually drive that home to them, especially now that we have that new program where we can actually show in real time the impact of heavy rainfalls in particular areas. That's going to be essential. So I'm glad you are going to take a look at that and maybe on each of our 4 major lakes and just give us some feeling for that impact. The last thing is really, maybe it's important to this, but kind of a sidebar on the Highway 61 project. Are we going to go to the phase that was part of the original plan of the landscape enhancement around that body? Because we don't have it. There was supposed to be a sediment drop pool right before the major pool. So I'm just, maybe that's a question for you more than Ian right now, but we can address that later. It's
Yes,
something yeah,
we can go with the design, yeah.
yeah, okay, good. All right, thank you.
I just saw another note that I
Yes,
skipped over,
sure.
and it's kind of relevant because, and I didn't notice this because I was focusing on Forest Lake, trying to get ready for our presentation for the Lake Association. But then when I looked through your presentation, your YouTube presentation, it's pretty clear that there were several other lakes, smaller lakes that had very high orthophosphate on the grass,
Yes.
but it didn't affect the surface water.
Yes.
And you just kind of said, so what? But is that a so what, or why is that? I guess that's the question I raised in my own mind because it was so dramatic. Even after the alum treatment, you could still see a little bit residue affecting the performance of the lake. So
Yeah.
to have that high level in those lakes and having a smaller lake and not affecting the phosphorus level was surprising to me.
Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. I probably glossed over it because, I think we're talking about Moody and Shields. They were stratified through an entire growing season where we
Okay.
calculate these averages for standards. So when the lake does turn over, all of that phosphorus mixes up into the surface water. However, that's in a colder part of the year, and so it's not driving the seasonal the growing season water quality, it's driving fall algae blooms. And so that's kind of, it's an important discussion to have. But it does not affect how the lake impairments are calculated. However, it is important. What we're really worried about is if that mixing occurs in the middle of the season, which happened on Forest Lake East, where it releases the orthophosphate in August, where the algae are already in the water
Right.
column and can eat that up. What was thankfully happening in Moody and Shields was that it was occurring after those external loads had kind of already calmed down, and then the colder water didn't have as much algae blooms. So
Okay.
it didn't affect it as
Much.
harshly as on Forest East, but that is a good discussion point, so I don't want to gloss over that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're ready to move on.
Now, is this gonna come back for approval then, or do we don't have to vote tonight then?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, we just wanted to give the managers opportunity to ask questions. Other things we'll be looking for, I guess it's a good question from the standpoint of Dr. Wilkerson, when will we want final input? We'd like to have the package again, ready to go out a week from now, so. Midweek next week, probably Wednesday latest, the managers could get any final observations or comments or questions in that could be addressed.
I think that orthophosphate on Shields and Moody should be clarified in the report, so otherwise, other people are gonna fall in the same trap I did when they see that. So that would be very helpful, and that explains the difference then, because I didn't notice that they were outside the room. In fact, I thought they were in the 8 sample seasonal, but I guess it was farther to the right, huh?
Yeah.
I have to look at that again, okay.
Okay, so comments to Anne or to staff here by Wednesday?
Correct. Well, both,
Oh, both, okay.
or either, I guess, is
Okay.
we'll pass them on to Dr. Wilkerson, but otherwise, managers are, feel free to communicate directly as well.
Well, I think it's better to have a system so that we're all doing the same thing. So should we send it? to
Well,
them?
ideally, there would be, just, yeah, emailed and then, sure, I guess
To
Emily.
Blaine
myself,
or
and
to
then,
Emily, who should we do it to?
how about this, send them to Dr. Wilkinson and then copy. Emily.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Everybody get that from the board managers? We're going to send them to Dr. Wilkinson, I'll just call her Ann. And also copy which staff member? We don't have to do. all of them. Emily, and Emily from staff, okay. Thank you.
I'll be curious.
Let me just raise another question. I noticed that your graphs you showed the standard deviations on the water quality graphs, which is great, but it makes it very difficult to see the trends there.
Sure,
So I was wondering, Emily had just plotted out the means,
yes.
the averages. Maybe we could have both those. So I'm not sure anybody from the public's gonna go through the monitoring report. So I'll leave that up to you guys to decide on whether, because it's, when you look at our report, you can see that report we're gonna use. Because we can't use your report, it's too complicated.
Right.
So just a thought, I don't know, if you're trying to communicate, that might be
It'd be nice if those dots were connected with a line.
well, I think you have separate graphs with
Separate.
nothing else on,
Okay,
just like Emily did, and then we'd have them, then they could look at whichever one they wanted.
Okay,
Because we're trying to make this as user friendly as possible, although I don't think many people are gonna go into that 80-page report, so even though it's on the website, but you never know.
okay, moving on, office space site visits.
Madam President, managers, as noted in the, board material there, Kevin being myself from UR, made some visits to, a variety of different, we coordinated and selected a number of different, facilities. And, really with, collaborated on, Kevin took the initiative though, for setting them up and then developing the questions, but, so I don't know if there's any particular questions, otherwise, Kevin, I don't think you really have you have a presentation, you just want to talk off the memo, and the lessons learned really is kind of.
Madam President, Board of Managers, I did prepare a very brief presentation if you wanted to have a dialogue, otherwise, we can move right into questions, but Tori has that, I believe, if you wanted to.
Okay,
I think it's old school, but very important to have you do these short presentations because we're getting your priority list basically when we
Yeah.
ask you to do that. And we can always go back to the full reports that you've done.
Yes.
But, and this is important for people that might be listening in or don't go on YouTube to see the videos, but can listen to these. So, please do so.
Yeah, so I will walk through this, it's just 10 slides, I think.
Mhm.
Mike, I will clear the dialogue, but Mike was present for all these interviews and certainly likely has something to add. You can just advance right away.
Okay.
So given what you're considering and the fact that there are precedents out there and those precedents are friendly and willing to share information, we thought it would make sense to engage these folks and have a conversation about, what they went through, what kind of lessons did they learn? What was their hindsight? How did they fund this thing? You can go ahead and advance. Prior to the interview, we did provide the precedents with this questionnaire. And again, you know, we're trying to characterize for you all, well, what's the context of this? Does it relate, you know, to Comfort Lake, Forest Lake or not? And garner some picture for, their perspective. We, I believe, met with them for an hour and a half. It was pretty fluid conversation. Mike drove most of that conversation and I was, the note taker and kind of packaged things, together. So we reached out to 4 folks, they all obliged, and we met with them over the winter. And the full interview transcripts, if you will, are in that memo, but Mike and I teased out some information that we thought, you know, were some themes that we could share. So if you want to advance, I'll just real quickly give you, even though I know that some of you are familiar with all of these sites, I'll just give you a quick contextual representation. So 9 Mile is a facility that Mike and I visited first. It's interesting, they've kind of branded their facility. It's not just their district office, but it's known as Discovery Point. It's quite interesting that, you know, the property, you know, is in a residential setting. It was donated to the district. And given that it's in a residential setting, that posed some maneuvering that the district needed to do to kind of smooth things over in terms of how is this local government unit gonna operate in this residential setting. And it's a 5-acre woodland parcel that's frankly seen as a park and, you know, utilized as such. Next, please. Mississippi Watershed Management Organization in Minneapolis, on the Mississippi River. Much more urban, it's new construction. Again, given that it's on the Mississippi River, a real interesting connection to water resources. They actually have a launch there that people launch, you know, kayaks and carrying watercraft. And all of these sites have gone above and beyond from a green infrastructure standpoint. This facility also took some of that inside as well in terms of energy efficiency and has got vast amounts of data on that front to nerd out on as well. The next site is perhaps Capital Region. That's the one, if you recall, that EUR was involved with in the design of that facility. Again, this is urban, but they renovated an existing building. There's 2 lots that Capital Region owns here. They've subsequently renovated both of those buildings. And I bring this up because, you know, I know that Capital Region over the years has thought, well, what are we gonna do with that facility? I believe it's now the impression that they're gonna hold on to that as a growth opportunity for them. And they have rented out a portion of that building to like-minded, you know, partners. But so they have this campus thing going on now with both of these facilities. And then the last one and the oldest one in terms of Minnesota Watershed District precedents is Ramsey, Washington. Believe it or not, it's 20 years old already, which is amazing. New construction right adjacent to the city of Little Canada. And that one also has a direct connection to water resources in Traverse Creek. So here are the reoccurring themes. There's certainly details in the body of this memo. And again, Mike, let me know if you feel something is missing that you'd like to draw attention to. I think everybody said, you know, build for the future. Of course, that means maybe perhaps more investment in terms of dollars, but I think we heard from everybody that they were out of space, you know, right at day one, and therefore then kind of needed to sort of start planning again right away. One of the things that's, you know, quite interesting to us was that these facilities have served as recruitment for these districts. They are such wonderful facilities that people want to work with that organization. You know, it's an attribute that they want to be associated with. Most of the folks were looking at 10-year return periods on this investment, you know, as they started to look at leasing and, you know, various options. Next, please. You know, this is a little bit of a no-brainer as well, but something to just sort of recognize that for those that were involved, you know, in getting this facility off the ground, whether that's in the planning stage or the building stages, it was all consuming for, you know, one or two individuals that were the point people for this, and you know, was their primary focus, and some of them did back off with, other priorities. You know, this is our priority now, we'll hit pause on these other things, and it was all consuming for those that were leading that. A number of the folks were faced with kind of value engineering their facility at some point. But all of them really had a similar theme of making a commitment and providing, going above and beyond, not just for demonstration, but again, for recruitment and education. They all had facilities that were used by outside entities. A lot of them had different experiences in terms of trying to manage that. It became those evening hours, became kind of costly. Then they had to have a staff there. And I think all of them have kind of gravitated a post-COVID world where they make their facility available within their time frame. They don't necessarily charge anything. Their compensation as they see it is developing reputations and creating awareness, for the district. I remember Capital Region, they say you can come and participate, but we want 5 minutes to tell you about what our mission is.
Of course.
Yeah. The boards, were enthusiastic, they had a similar vision, and we're kind of united around these initiatives. And maybe one more point here. Yeah, the other thing we heard was that, once folks had settled on a site and settled on an approach, again, this is a little bit obvious, but there was a lot of emphasis putting on being good neighbors, keeping people informed, engaged about what was transpiring to try to, reduce, NIMBY concerns or things of that nature. So, couple other pieces that we heard from the Mississippi WMO and then Capital Region, and then that'll be it for the presentation is, the thing that I thought was very interesting, so Mississippi WMO literally gave us maybe like 4 or 5 staff or something, Mike, who participated in this dialogue. So we had a really nice dialogue with them, and when they were considering their options, they had other options within Hennepin County to utilize facilities that had vacancies, so to speak, and they held their ground. And the belief was that we want to be prominent. We want to not take a quote unquote secondary facility because we feel that we become secondary in terms of the eyes of the public. So we want to be out front, and we want this facility to be emblematic of who we are and position us, in that place. In order to, there's politics involved with everything. In order to kind of win over everybody, they had to make investments in activating that space. What that means is, again, they want it to be an asset for the community. Capital Region, we talked a great deal about these guiding principles that they produced, and Mike took some interest in that. We had a fairly long dialogue about it. It's that those principles are included in the report. The reason why we draw attention to that is that united staff and the board, and it was something for them to go back to when they're making decisions. Remind me again about what our priorities are, what our commitments, and it was just sort of a guiding, uniting, document through the whole process. And they actually, I believe, wrote that before they had a site, before they engaged any consultant, and got them going with some momentum. And then the other thing I thought that was brilliant, in part because we were working with them, is they really proficiently delegated responsibilities and had one staff member be involved with the exteriors, another be involved with the interiors, another person was involved with education, and it really allowed them to do their job. But yet, take on this additional task, so. The guiding principles I just included here, it's a little difficult to read at that scale, but, that's a quick summary. Mike, do you feel like there is any stories that you heard that you'd like to draw attention to, or?
Well, the one thing we know is, with some of these is how, well, a couple pieces that, the donation value or how the partnerships drove, some of it, the 9 mile, initially the history is somebody was looking to donate their property, came to the city and then if you don't want it, so ultimately ended with them. Randy Washington, they were looking and the city said, well, if you take this space over here, you can have it kind of thing. So those are obviously good leverages. Even the thing that I didn't know about the Mississippi WMO piece was that they're an organization even younger than Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District and started out with just a couple of people that were spun off and and were housed in the public works space for a few years and where nobody could really find them and they didn't have much virtually no exposure there, people. And there were board members, I think one in particular, which these are council members being assigned as the board, that was really the champion for them and the vision of wanting it to be this larger piece, so it was really driven by the board as well from that perspective. So yeah, I like the guiding principles that Cap Region had. I thought it was but it was also just from the perspective of if there was a decision that needed to be made during the construction phase, they would go back to that, whether the administrator or board or whoever, they would refer back to that, okay, this is what we said. And note that's that additional thing, because you could easily see where you can start getting some potential for like, oh, well, maybe we should do this or something, but it's just like, no, those were the guiding principles. And then so it helps to do cost containment as well. So I thought that was an important element. But it was good to have those conversations. So thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, the last thing I would say was Mike had asked me when we were kind of coming to some conclusion on this in terms of, well, what's the value here to a future design team? And I think that there is value to a future design team, but I think frankly, it's more directly of value to the district and to helping unite around ultimately what you want to achieve. And, also know that you've got a resource to go to, all these folks, have said, and this is no surprise to y'all, given that them, is when you get to this point, check in with us again. If you've got a question on financing, we're here for you. Those dialogues have been started and, can and will continue, and those folks are available, so.
Good. Wonderful. Okay, any comments, questions? This is
Manager
something that-
Anderson.
Yes, Manager Baki.
I like this idea of guiding principles that Capital Region came up with, and I cannot read the screen. It's so small. Can you email those to us, please, so we can take a look at those?
Yeah, Madam President, Board of Managers, I believe that it's in the memo that was in your board packet.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going through that right now, and I'm not finding it.
It's at the end.
It's
Yeah.
page 21.
Got it.
Yeah, I
Okay,
wasn't sure if I.
So here
wanted-
are my thoughts about that. I think as part of our strategic planning process, we could easily identify guiding principles that would fit for us and perhaps have staff involvement with that as well, so that we have something before we go into hiring a architect to start the actual design. That would be my thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's good. I don't think we should incorporate them with the strategic plan that we're doing now, but have a separate guiding principles for the building, and we want what we want that building to mean to us in the community. I see them as distinct things, but the concept I like as well. Can I ask a question about your involvement, not yours personally, but EOR's involvement with Capital Region? Because I've never understood whether you were part of the design of the building or was it the outside?
Yeah, it was most entirely the site design.
Okay.
So, we, had a relationship with an architect as it is a team, but the reality is the architect was working on the buildings and we were working, on the property. Those things have to marry together and there are a lot of synergies, intentionally we're collaborating, but yeah, that was our role, was
Yeah.
the civil, the landscape architecture. Part of the.
Okay,
yeah.
so I know that you got an award for that with some organization. I don't remember which one it is, but it's displayed in the Capital Region meeting area, so I see it every time I go to a meeting there. So kudos for that, but you've been long-term partners for us, and to make the process easier, it's easier to work with a team that you know. And so the architect, is that firm somebody that you work with all the time, or is that just casual?
No, absolutely. So, we've got a long history with the firm that worked there. Of course, there's turnover, but and Britta, in fact, is running multiple projects with this firm right now. So, we've had probably done maybe a dozen projects or so together with MSR. Yeah.
Okay, good. Now I know what I know from the architect.
Yes, the
Yeah.
architect
Well,
presentation.
yeah, you did a great job on that, and you worked with us on the golf course project, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's wonderful, yeah, good. I don't have any other questions, this is just a discussion period, so anyone else from the board? Want to make a comment? Okay. Just.
So I do have comments.
ahead, Matt.
A couple observations. I thought it was really well done, and we had been to some of those sites already because when Beth was here, she set up this thread and we met and so forth. So it's good to see some of the same reinforcement that we picked up on too. But I think we should use this information as part of our own guiding principles. It's kind of like a cafeteria
Mhm.
of possibilities that the whole board can look at and pick out what's appropriate for us. I like that very much. I thought I was very impressed with the concept that this always takes longer than you think. So maybe 2 to 3 years, starting now. So I bring this up later on in another part of the meeting. I want to build on that point, but. And then the other thing that was a little disappointing to me is that I didn't see a lot about educational programs, and this has been my pet peeve all along. We want to have a facility that's going to have space developed, devoted to education. But what is education? Now, I would have to say from everything I've seen so far, my visits there and everything else, that education is the outside of the building and looking at sites, looking at, BMPs. Now, if there's any more to that than that, then we should understand that. I mean, you go down to the Hormel place down in wherever it is south of here. I've never been there, but I understand they have a great big facility and there's a lot of other stuff going on. There's one down by Afton that actually has like 7,000 students a year go through that, with actual formal courses. So I don't think we even get an architect before we get an architect. We need to decide what that is. And I don't know, maybe that you did talk about this, but didn't capture the ideas, but I would like to have that put together for us to understand that, because that's a very big part of what we think we want.
Manager
And
Anderson?
Yes, Manager Baki?
I guess in my response to Manager Schmaltz is that could be part of our guiding principles, is that we'd want to specify an education facility as part of our office space.
Right, educational facility, that's what I'm trying to get defined, so, but so, I think it's a lot easier to start with other people's ideas, and then it'll save us a lot of time to build something that looks appropriate for what we want to do. I'm not sure we even know what we want to do, but that's why we have to have some other ideas, I think.
Well, I think that's the whole point of
Yeah.
this, and I'm glad that Mike and Kevin, thank you. Kevin did this for us because it gives us it saves a lot of time. We don't have to be scratching our
Right.
heads all the time. And we've got, as you said, a menu of things that we can select from. But just the point, that I wanted to make about the building being the education also. I've been to all of these many times except for South Washington. I've not been to that building ever, but every time you go there, they've got some new, flower or natural plant or some, some type of way to tame the water that comes off your roofs and so forth. And it's just fascinating to see that every time you go. There's always something new that they're doing, and it's all about conservation. It's all about keeping water on your own property. And so anyone coming through that building is going to feel that energy, and they're going to see the actual implementation of some of the ideas that our staff talks to people about when they're doing grants, for example. They get to actually see what's happening. But it becomes a very interactive building process for the public because, they're coming in to meet with staff, but they're also looking at several different projects that we have built into the building or outside the building, and that helps. But, so I see the building being that, but I also, see the education piece being, what we're doing now, which is good, reaching out to young people and the citizens, older people with homes and so on. But we'll have a space where we can actually do those, where they're coming to us all the time for those and not having to plan it in some other building within the community. So that's reinforcement right there. And then we've always got new things going on with, packaging and flyers and all of that kind of thing. And so they're getting that type of reinforcement. So I think it's both. I think you incorporate it in the building and the landscape, and then also with our own education wing, if you will.
I think it's important too, because you're talking about show and tell. That's the
Mhm.
first thing you
Yeah.
learn as a teacher, or if you're gonna be a good salesperson, you gotta know how to show and
Right.
tell. So this is gonna have a big impact on where we build the building.
Mhm.
If we wanna have interactive with nature, and I think some of them like Taylor Falls, that's a great state park,
Mhm.
because you can walk through it, you can experience all the geology by seeing it and
Mhm.
reading the signs. I think that kind of interaction is something public can really relate to. So if we're gonna do something like that, it's gotta be near a wetland, or it's gotta be, it's gotta be something that we can use, or an old stand of trees that are, like, we got a couple sites that have a bunch of old stuff that hasn't been developed, right? And a lot of old trees and different varieties, et cetera, that you could tour through and have signs, et cetera, get people involved. So
I think it
I
has.
think
to be-
it's a big impact on what we wanna do.
Yeah, I think it has to be appropriate for our own ecosystem that we
Right.
have here within our district.
Exactly.
So it might be different than some of the others. Or we might be able to take some of what they use, but the Discover, is it Discover? Discovery Center, yes, the one, pardon me? Okay, that one is 9 Mile Creeks. Has a little bit of everything because they've got all of this land, 5 acres of this land, a very modern style building that was given to them, a home that's been converted, and they've got patches of different natural plants around the place. They have a cistern system outside, which is a gutter system, but it flows the rainwater off of the roof. You can see it going into the treatment area, and then that's used for watering the plants. And Capital Region has a footprint in an urban area. And they've packed a lot in there. They still have that sort of outside natural plant thing going on, but they're also educating on the flow of water. And that's really innovative, I think, on the side of the building as you're walking in. And you can see different rain events, and just by pulling this lever or that thing, and so you can make it what you need to make it, and that's appropriate for their setting. I think we've got probably both of those going on in our district, but
I like your original perception of the fact that our location is unique and that we're kind of outside the metro area. And so, I think you use the term really gateway to the lake country,
Mhm.
you know, so that's. You could draw all those people around those lakes in for education, we could, schools here don't get a lot of help from this
Mhm.
inside.
Yeah.
Municipal area, we could have a more formal education program and draw all the rural schools down into here.
Mhm.
Especially if they, most of them live around lakes to begin
Yeah.
with, right?
Yeah,
So it's a really an opportunity, so these are some of the things we have to,
yeah,
as Dave said, we have to, prioritize and
Mhm.
figure out what we want to have, so.
but it's an exciting time and
It is.
I think we all agree that we need a building. Mike's not had an office in the last 14 years, a real office. So, you know, we can't keep operating like that. We don't hardly have any space to meet when we've got bigger groups. So, so I think this was always meant to be a temporary home, but we've been here a long time. And it's time to move on, and I think we've got a good starting basis here for us to have, we're gonna have to have special workshops. You can't fit this into a meeting, you know, regular meeting. But, I think we're at an exciting point, where we can, discuss this and we can discuss some of the other options that we have. We have builders that are willing to build the building of our choice to, on the site where we want it to be. And we don't have, they'll build it, they'll maintain it, we just rent it. Stay in that lease thing, so, that's an option that we need to explore, so we don't have to bond. You know, that really is going to be, I think, where the trouble comes in, is how are you going to fund this, and then getting the public to go along with that concept. But, that's just a hill to overcome, it's not a mountain range, so we can do that. Yes,
Madam President, managers, and I know this conversation has come up in the past in various forms, but most recently then, this question about what the education programming would look like, and we've kind of long, I shouldn't say long, but we, for some number of years, have circled around the idea of a watershed education and research facility concept, so so trying to provide some framework for the board. I've started on a process where I've asked Adam to start looking at like what is available within a 1 hour drive currently, because the Warner Nature Center is no longer available for, we used to fund bus transportation for students out of Forest Lake, for example, so it's no longer available for them, so. But what else is there and how much need or capacity is there? So. And with that, then I've also reached out to Hamlin University, longstanding relationship with Tracy Fredine. I think he actually came to the board meeting some number of years ago when we first were here and had a TV thing with them that we placed out in the lobby area for on the Mississippi River educational programming thing. But anyway, I'm gonna reach out to or started a dialogue about this topic and maybe helping the district frame up that question of what would our educational program look like, and just longer term around the concept of watershed education, because there are a lot of environmental education facilities, but really, you know, if you start looking at watershed education, that's a whole different thing, and those are few and far between to my knowledge. So, I mean, so that's another piece that we would want to look at. You know, we have, I think, 4 current research activities with different universities going on right now in collaboration with the district. So, I mean, again, we've established and developed that relationship with different universities, and you know, that could be ongoing, but it would be even further ongoing if we had a facility that supported that kind of activity.
yeah.
So,
I know, I've been going to that, University of Minnesota watershed meeting in the fall.
mhm.
I think,
Water Research Center at the.
yeah, it's downtown at that,
Mhm.
big arena.
River Center.
River Center, thank you, in St. Paul, and I find that to be really fascinating. When I've talked to people there, manning a booth for some of the programs at the U, or degrees, actually, that the U sponsors. They've been very interested in following up with those types of talks. So I think we've got a big resource at the U of M to tap into Masaryk and some of those other
Mhm.
specialty areas that they have. And I would think that they would want to use it as an intern place for people going through that degree process. Because there isn't a lot, or there's not a big specialty on watershed work. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think we've got lots of potential to keep that busy and active and serving both local and more regional needs.
And we know that we're the central location for the Lower St. Croix, because
Yes,
all the meetings are held in either Wyoming or the Forest Lake here, so,
Wyoming Library,
right.
which is smaller than this room.
Yeah.
Well, very exciting. Thank you for spending the time doing this. Thank you, Kevin, for your work. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
it's impressive how well you organized it all, too, 'cause
Mhm.
I'm thinking if we tried to do that, but we didn't get nearly as
Yeah.
complete or
Yeah,
as accurate as you guys.
but
did, so
I think we
it's good
should
work.
have you and whoever else needs to come to talk about your work with this type of building. So that we, all of us, the board can really get a good idea of what you can do, what can you lead, you know, in that area for us. And just so many other things after we learn what you could do, and especially the, architect connection too. Maybe they should come on. Mike can arrange all of that later, but we'll talk about scheduling all of that, but that's a good start for us, I think. We'll save a lot of time trying to weed through applications, interviewing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Madam President, Board Managers, that's a maybe perfect segue for the next agenda item. I feel like that was set up.
Okay, then. What is the next? I forgot my glasses, so it takes me a little longer to focus. Where am I here?
Office space architect.
Thank you. There I am. Right.
So, Madam President, Board
Office space
Managers,
site.
I'm gonna turn it over to my colleague here, Britta, who's gonna present this after having a conversation with Mike. Again, knowing that you guys don't have a site yet, you're still trying to figure some things out. A lot of chicken and egg, what comes first, but in talking with Mike, you're formulating, you know, what is the potential step forward? And so we put our heads together and try to come up with a, you know, modest but meaningful, step forward, and Britta's gonna present that for you all.
Madam President, too, I did want to provide clarification too, because I don't know if it's sufficient within the memos, but I want to make sure it's in the minutes that the idea of having an architect at this juncture is not that we're planning. You know, we're not planning a construction phase yet,
Mhm.
this is more to facilitate a conversation about this very topic that we just concluded on what a facility could look like,
Mhm.
right, and a rendering. The board has talked about this for some time, if we're gonna go ask for potential donations for the education side in particular. So I just wanna make sure that there's clarity as far as the expectation of, you know, the outcome of what this effort is.
Well, let's not get hung up on donations. Because we may not have to have donations. We need to talk about that, the financing thing later on, but let's keep our minds open to what we want. And if you have already reached out to all these contacts at universities, that's great. Let's just add the U to it and see what they have to say,
Mhm.
and that will help.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Britta.
All right, Madam President, Board of Managers, my name is Britta Hanson, I'm a landscape architect at EOR. I am here, and I want to add that my husband grew up on Keewatin, so I'm kind of home. Yeah. I'm
Great
from the
water
neighborhood.
quality there.
Yes, one of the most beautiful lakes
Yes.
in the world. right?
Yes, exactly.
I'm maybe
The
biased.
cleanest anyway.
Isn't it though? Great job on that, everybody here. So I am here to talk to you about what a potential first step is in engaging an architect that is actually before design. So it's generally known as the pre-design phase. And it really encompasses a lot of the topics that you guys have been covering in this previous segment of the meeting about what are the project goals? What do you hope to accomplish? What is the vision that you have for your future facility? And what needs do you have for the facility as well? So we have prepared this scope of services to begin the process of architect involvement, as Administrator Kinney said. This is not a commitment of any sort to doing any design or to hiring an architect to design a facility. It is more about conceptualizing the facility that you want and what kind of components that it would have. The scope is detailed in this memo, but I'll summarize it as well. EOR can assist because we have experience doing site design, working with architects, and as you mentioned, working on the Capital Region project. We can help to identify a number of potential architects in the region who would be able to help you with this redesign process. We would identify and help you vet the architects and choose one that would resonates most with you and that you would like to work with on the project. Once selected, we would help to assist that selected architect with preparing a pre-design report that we anticipate they would do engagement with you all to spend some time and learn about your vision and your needs and define the project, the level of detail that you would need to actually issue an RFP in the future to hire an architect to design the building. Now, you could hire this architect if it works great and you really like what they've come up with. But the ultimate goal here is to develop a pre-design report that outlines the key aspects of the project and also create a rendering of a potential facility that you could use in engagement and budgets. Yeah,
I love it.
So EOR would help facilitate some learning sessions with the architect. We talk about project facilities scope, the goals for the project, you know, your vision, all these things that you have been talking so eloquently about today. I did bring an example table of contents of a pre-design report from the architect that we worked with on Capital Region. We're also working with them on the Southdale Library. And this is a table of contents for a pretty extensive pre-design report. But it does talk about project goals and
I will scan that. Can I scan that later and,
you can take that, yeah.
and I'll share it with the rest of the pictures.
Great. Yeah, so after the pre-design report, the architect would also prepare a concept rendering. Since there is no specific location, this rendering would be very conceptual and speak to the general size and the setting of the facility and the type of environment that you're envisioning for it. But it would not have specifics like building size, materiality, number of openings, and things like that, because that happens in the next phase of design, which would be schematic design. So we have a proposal here for EOR to assist with that process, to identify some architects and help you vet them and move through that process. And then there would be an additional, we are estimating 25,000 to 40,000 for the architect chosen to do the pre-design work.
Okay, I'm ready to act. I will move to authorize the
Oh, so you
administrator.
have any questions? Does anybody have any input on this?
Yeah, after we make the motion. Then we'll have discussion.
Good.
Okay, I will make the motion to authorize the administrator on advice of council to enter into an agreement with EOR in an amount not to exceed 13,500 in accordance with the April 3rd, 2025 scope of work.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All right, now we're open for discussion.
Manager Anderson.
Mr. Baki? Proceed.
I noticed in the memo, it mentions the range of 25 to 40K is anticipated. And then it states if beneficial to the district, EOR is open to holding the contract with the selected architect on the district's behalf. Can we get a little more explanation of how that works?
Yeah, I can maybe speak to that. We had included that just as if there was a benefit to the district in terms of efficiency or timeliness. We could hold the contract and exercise it that way. You know, technically, the architect would be working for us, but the reality is they would still be working for you. I don't see any difference in terms of delivery. It's just, if that is convenient to the district, you know, we could do that, you know, on your behalf.
So be the general contractor basically for the
Yeah.
building. Okay, I get it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Does does that add efficiency to the process?
Does it add efficiency? Is that your question?
Yeah, does that add efficiency to the process where you, whereas coming back to the board is really kind of a long delay of kinds of things, but if you're holding the contract and working directly with them, it seems like things should be able to move more quickly, wouldn't they?
Madam President, Board of Managers, there would be efficiencies in, as if, you know, let's say it would take you 3 months to do that, and legal counsel has to review contracts and gets concerned with that. We might be able to expedite that. Perhaps that would be where there could be some efficiencies, and part of the reason why we, you know, offer such a thing. And again, the reason why there's a range there is we haven't engaged, you know, a conversation yet, directly, and we haven't really, nailed down the scope yet, but that would be kind of approximate ballpark for this kind of entry point.
Yes.
Yeah, I think just maybe jumping off here a little bit, I think one of the greatest efficiencies is that they have a lot of experience in dealing with the architect on day-to-day issues and questions of how to get things done. None of us probably have that same level of experience, so I think there'd be a lot of efficiency in that. You know what they ask, you know, where, when to push, when to pull, et cetera, and, you know, we'd be more reacting to the architect and him reacting to what our needs are, I think. So
Regardless of,
I would be very comfortable with that myself.
yeah, Madam President, Board of Managers, regardless of who holds the contract, we're still gonna be providing you those efficiencies by being here and present and vocal, so.
Yeah, and those are my thoughts as well. But also, in statute, the engineer or civil engineer is supposed to be the manager of all of our projects and structures, building, in the states or in the district. So I think, that's the way we should go. Not just that we want to go, but we should do that. So, and I agree, everything, the prior managers have said, it will bring efficiency, if you're the right person. It's like trying to be your own contractor when you're building a house. It just, you know, you've got all these other workers that are there, you know, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You need a general contractor oversight. In this case, we'll have our engineers do it. Our engineering team do it. So I think on all bases, that makes sense.
I just have a question, I guess we really should probably get our thoughts together and the guiding principles like we talked about before. Kind of know what we want to do and what our vision is to a certain extent before we get the architect engaged, or is the architect going to help us do that?
That would be part of the process. I
It would
would
be.
suggest that you could consider that part of this whole process. And that you don't have to get everything figured out and your ducks all in a row, that.
Because I'm thinking that if you work with an architect and had a lot of confidence with them and so forth, there's a lot of synergy working with the same person, I think. The only concern I would have is that all of your facilities, or wait, see, which ones have you worked on? The three you worked on Capital One,
We
Capital
did
Region.
Capital Region.
which is a city
That's
facility.
an
We've
very
got a,
urban, yeah.
we've got a non-urban
totally
area. Yeah,
different.
yeah, so, and if the architect's used to doing those kind of city things, would that be a limitation on their thought process and what we might need where we've got more expanse and
Well,
more?
I mean, I think that architect is phenomenal. They have a very strong sensibility of sustainability and being context sensitive in their design. But I would suggest that you will want to vet some different options, just to see if there's other architects that are more sensitive to this setting and can offer you choices. Yeah,
Yeah.
But that's why I would feel more comfortable, I think, in terms of having a better understanding of what we as a group are looking for. Otherwise, the architect's gonna take us through that, and when we get dragged into where he's coming from.
Well, I
So-
think what she's saying though is that they're going to help us with this process up front to get all of that on paper. You know, what is our vision for a building and what are we trying to accomplish with this new building? All of those things. The other thing that has to be mixed into this entry area here is the finding of land or a building maybe that is already there and can be changed to meet our needs. So I think this is gonna help in that first process, correct? You're going to be helping to guide us in that?
But if the architect's gonna help us do that, we haven't hired an architect yet.
No, that doesn't come until later. What we need to do is find the space, so we need to get a commercial real estate person on board. It doesn't cost us anything. And they give us all the opportunities that exist within our boundary area, and then we choose where we would like to be. So,
That sounds like we've really jumped pretty far ahead, but I'm still concerned
not
about.
really, that's part of the beginning piece.
Okay, so you're gonna vet the process, you're gonna bring like 3 architects and they're gonna make a presentation to us, correct?
Yes.
What input are they gonna get from us on that?
Well, I think in the vetting phase, they're going to present what they can offer and what their experience is and their design sensibility. Now, the pre-design phase doesn't have to do with style or materials or anything like that, so you're not
No, I
committing
understand
to that. But they would basically give a pitch to you about why they could facilitate this project the best for you.
That's why I felt better if we would give them a sheet with what our thoughts are and we, as a group, we're
Well,
looking
that's what
for.
that's what we're gonna produce out of this phase. That we're just, this motion is for that. It's for EOR to lead us in that process.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask. Are they gonna lead us in
Mhm.
doing that? Put that
Yeah.
thought process together?
Yeah, remember how we worked with Doug? He was a former administrator, but he went to Tommy. He went to
Houston engineer.
Houston, thank you, Houston Engineering, and he led us through that whole process of
Work plan.
a work plan for what our needs were going to be in the future to help us understand what kind of personnel. One thing we didn't really explore with him is how we're going to be operating as we move out of the capital projects in the ground. And the work that we're going to be doing after that is going to be totally different. We're still gonna have to have our maintenance, people doing the projects, but at some point, these big in the ground kind of projects are going to end. And we're going to be moving into the greens, open space and green belt move, which is really about sustainability and climate change and making sure that flooding is taken care of, that we've got as much open space that we need to help keep our ecosystem for each of our sub-watersheds healthy. So there's an opportunity for us to do all of that. And so it's gonna change the way our work needs are going to be, and it's going to increase that because You know, it's gonna end up being a lot of land, surveying and purchasing, and it's going to be more education. So that area is gonna grow. So, yeah, I think we're going to have to take all of that into account as we're talking about what kind of building we need.
Madam President, Board of Managers, one thing I would respond to in terms of these guiding principles. And I, again, having gone through this, many, many times, I think those guiding principles are much more about the owner, Comfort Lake, Forest Lake in this instance, and has less to do with an architect. An architect's gonna be appreciative of that, and they're gonna respond to it, but the reality is I think that has less influence over them and much more about kind of uniting yourselves and kind of a vision. They can, as Brita was saying, can assist in that part. And if you wanna get at those guiding principles before you ultimately hire them, you can do that. Acknowledging that this is a little bit, again, chicken and egg, and there might be a misstep, but we're of the opinion that taking this step forward will be of value to, regardless of where you show up. There will be tangible returns here, whether it's new construction or renovation, or frankly, even, occupying a different space, there will be value to the district in going through that exercise. Ultimately, you need to know, in my opinion, hey, we want X, okay, well, that's, another, $1 million, giving you some sense of, here's our wants and here's the cost for that. And again, this is theoretical because we don't have a site, but we can still provide you numbers to help kind of frame out, is that what we really want at that cost, or whether there's some concessions or prioritization. So that's ultimately what we would be delivering here.
So we shouldn't be too worried about that. then.
No.
Okay,
They're helping to corral us, just like Doug did in his team, helping to project our work needs. So anyway, that's the way I see it.
I mean, if they can herd squirrels, that's fine.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, any further comments?
Manager Anderson.
Yes, Mr. Baki, please.
So these 4 tasks that are outlined in the memo will conclude around the middle of July. Is that correct?
Yes, so we have in our schedule approximately 6 weeks to do task 1, an additional 6 weeks for tasks 2 and 3, and then an additional 4 weeks to complete task 4. So I'd have to look at a calendar, but if that puts us in
Or towards the end of
July.
August.
You think it's more?
And we can start building in September. That was a joke.
What, 2028?
Yeah.
There you go.
About right, too. All right, any further comments? Questions? All right, let's do a roll call.
All right, Manager Schmaltz,
I,
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Anderson.
Happily, yes. First step.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's.
can I bring one other subject just about
Certainly.
timing? This is gonna take several years, probably, or at least 2 years, probably. So I think we've been living in this facility for quite a while. And it impressed me a lot about, it was Capital, or somebody said that they didn't want to live in a second class operation because it reflects who they are and what they do. And we certainly do not have a second class track record for 10 years. We're probably one of the better watersheds in the state with what we've done and with the staff we've got, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I'm thinking that since it's gonna be several more years, maybe what we should do is try to get a little bit more space in the short term. And I'm recommending, and we've talked about this a little bit, looking at across the small office across the street. Let's put some of our people up, there's room for vehicles over there, et cetera, and maybe move into another lease. You looked at it? So that's not an option.
It's been gutted. It's been gutted.
The old
Yeah.
bank building, is that what you're talking about? Yeah,
Yeah.
I would think so.
So you can still put cubicles in that in there and put an office in there, can't you?
No, I mean, like, I don't think there's power. Like, they've gutted the whole thing, it's, and. You know, it's.
So what's available then with the signs?
Well, I don't know, but your topic is. I'm just letting you know that
Okay,
we could consider that, and I think that that's,
well, maybe it's not there somewhere else, so I don't know.
Correct, there's some-
Or if you
I
feel that's
have
not a good idea, that's fine too. I just think we owe it to our staff and to you. To get a little bit more space, and the stuff upstairs isn't gonna work for us, so. You know, and we don't want something 3 miles away either, so I made my point, let's just talk
Yeah.
about it on the side
Yeah,
and
let's-
move forward. I
yeah,
don't wanna take
that'll
any more
be-
time. I just didn't wanna let that escape the
Yeah,
moment
that'll
of
be part of this.
discussion here.
Yeah.
I think, introductory thing. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Nice to
Thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much.
Very good
Thank
session
you.
for us, I
Yeah.
feel much more
Good,
comfortable.
good, very productive.
so manager, President, on the line, you touched on the workload analysis piece a couple times, and, that's at least 5 or 6 years in the rearview mirror already, so, and it was really intended for that,
Mhm.
so,
It needs to be updated.
right,
I
that's
was
why we
just-
could look
I
at
was
that,
just making a comparison
Right.
to what it would be like doing this project, that's all.
right?
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's important from the perspective of what everyone communicated to us, and that as soon as they, they didn't have enough space,
Mhm.
so but at what point and for me, it's a matter of objectively looking at what does the future build out and population look like for the district in 10, 15, 20 years. We know it's one of the fastest growing areas of the metro, according to Met Council projection wise,
Mhm.
so. So you'll just have more demand on resources and impacts and more, presumably. More needs from that other perspective is,
Well, a good architect will build a building for us that can easily be expanded.
I just wanna make sure that we're
Mhm.
including that in the conversation.
Yeah.
And I know we've talked about it, but
Okay. Well, thank you again, and we have to move on here, so. I'll meet our 8:30, go to bed time. Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay, old business, A is 2024 year in review annual report progress report presentation. I assume that's going to be you, Emily?
Yes,
Has
thank you.
anybody had a chance to review her presentation?
Mhm.
So if we've all reviewed it, maybe we don't have to review it again.
Well, I don't think she's going to do a full, just do a synopsis. I think it's important for people that don't get on YouTube, but they can access the audio portion of our meetings. And so if you could just do a quick overview, I think we've all read through it. So I'll leave that up to you, Emily.
Thank you, Madam President, managers. So, yeah, we had 3 different documents as part of this agenda item. Typically, our process is to put these in the last board packet in March, and then, have our presentations at the first meeting in April, and then look for board approval of all these things at the second meeting in April. So that'll be April 24th. So no action tonight, just, a space for discussion, and I can provide some highlights too. I didn't create a second slide deck like Anne did, but I can just verbally go through some of the updates from the presentation that was posted online, and I can pull things up if people have questions. But in summary, the first of the 3 documents we call the year in review. It's just a 1-page kind of infographic, you might say, and just the easiest to access for people. The annual report, there's a lot of boxes we need to check and certain things we need to report to the state. And then the progress report is also very long because we have so many goals and so many metrics that we track. And so our thought with the year in review is just something really easy for people to take a glance at, and then you get a sense of all the different things that are going on. So that's that document. And then the annual report. So I'll just note, this is really the big one that is required by statute and has to be submitted to the state by April 30th. So once the board approves that on the 24th, we'll finalize and then we'll get it submitted to the Board of Water and Soil Resources and the DNR. And that, we kind of did some formatting updates within the last couple of years. So this year's is similar formatting to 2023 and, covers sort of the basics, the board of managers and staff contacts, financials and advisory committees and things like that. And then really what we tried to do is give one page to each of the programs and just give highlights for each program of just the things that are going on. And some of it is metrics and some of it is kind of more qualitative description. But, the purpose of this report is to really kind of paint a picture of, the wide variety of all the different activities that the district accomplishes in a given year. And that includes the project section as well. And then the progress report or the progress summary, this one, it's gotten really long over the years. The district's first progress report was in 2016, I believe. And each year it's grown a little bit more in size. And we've each year tried to refine it to be, just easier for people to connect with. Because sometimes this data can be really dense and it's really technical. And, it still is kind of technical, but it's formatted in a way to try to concisely describe our progress toward our lake goals, and also with a particular highlight on lake impairment delisting, nutrient delistings to be specific. So that is a lot of the section of the presentation that we spend a lot of time on, is looking at not just the 2024 monitoring data, but the whole last 10 years and sometimes more, the body of data that the district has collected on these lakes and the story that tells. And, the conclusion that we've come to for a lot of these lakes is, for any given lake, there's a case that could be made that the district could propose that the lake be delisted for its nutrient impairment. That being said, there's one thing to kind of check the boxes, and yes, the state criteria is this, and this. If the water quality readings are such, then it qualifies for delisting. That being said, there's a lot of other considerations. Projects that are in progress, projects that we are kind of developing for the future, grant seeking for those projects. And so that's why we kind of put out that discussion recommendation of managers kind of discussing those potential lake impairment delisting requests. We did Bone Lake last year. We could put forward more lakes this year, but we've got a lot of other things, projects and the like, still in the works. And so it's kind of a discussion and maybe kind of a strategizing for that. So that's my summary.
Well, I just want to say, I looked through these reports pretty carefully, and I had very little to say about the annual report this year. The progress report is, like you said, it's the scientific basis for all of our decisions, and it's actually the outcome to all of that. And so that's wonderful to always have that report, and that's interesting to look at things, as you said, over time. The annual report, I thought, was just really, really good on the graphics side. The top page, the cover is just really eye-grabbing and attention grabbing. And I thought the interior, there was more white space so that you're not reading this, this tome with just tiny type all over the place. So it made it a lot easier to read, a lot easier to get through. So I just have a couple of wordsmithing areas that I'll talk to you about, Emily. But other than that, I thought it was really well done. Any
Manager
other comments?
Anderson?
Yes, Manager Baki.
I agree with you. I think this is, the annual report is just awesome. Some fantastic information. It really highlights some of the accomplishments of the district in 2024. I did have a question on page 23 under grants. It mentions that the district submitted 24 grant applications and 13 grants were awarded, applied for 1.2 million and 877,000 was awarded. The Lessard Sams isn't factored into that, I assume, and I'm just wondering why we're not including that as well.
So, speaking about fiscal year 2024 grants, how many applications we submitted? Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up the page. Well, I will say, so we applied for and received a Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage grant a couple years ago now. So that grant was executed in 2023. And then we skipped a year. We didn't apply for Lessard Sam's again. And I'm getting the years kind of mixed up, but there was a couple of years we did not apply for Lessard Sam's because we've been kind of working with that landowner trying to close on the acquisition. And then once that was a little bit more clear, we would go back to the Lessard Sam's and request a grant for restoration funds. And so that's what we're working on right now and should have a memo actually at the next or maybe the May board meeting for the board.
So the Lessard Sam's grant doesn't carry over year to year and it cannot be included as part of an awarded grant. Is that correct?
It's just a matter of counting it. You know, the funds are definitely there, but it's just from year to year, we're keeping track of how many new grants we're applying for. And so, yeah, in addition to those new grants that would come in any given year, there's still the old grants that we might be holding on to funds in the bank account for, or maybe we don't physically have the funds, but the grant is awarded and just waiting to be drawn upon. And so, yeah, at any given time, we have a lot of grants at our disposal for various projects.
Yeah, I think the criteria, Dave, is the annual 24 year. So everything we put into the hopper requesting, whatever comes out gets reported. If that helps you with so stuff that's been done in earlier years is reported in the earlier years, and it may still be there until we actually draw it out. So it's kind of like in a holding fund for us, right?
Yeah.
Escrow fund, right?
Yeah, it will.
Yeah, I guess
will-
my question is, can we somehow and have that recorded here as well? I mean, that we have received those funds. I mean, that's a significant amount that, isn't mentioned here, and that's all. That's my thought.
Well, we could do that by, actually, I think you have it in there. Don't you have a chart that shows where we rank in terms of all the other watersheds in the top there that shows like 6.5 or 8 million that we've won since the last 10 years or something like that? I think that would cover that also, if that's in that report. I can't recall. I saw it somewhere. It might be in the it might be in the progress report.
Yes, Manager Schmaltz's point, we have an appendix to the progress report that has a cumulative count of all of our Clean Water Fund projects and practices grants to date. Lessard Sam's wouldn't be included in that. So
Right.
To Manager Baki's point, yeah, there's not something calling out that big 1.9 million Lessard Sam's grant in here, and I could certainly add a note in the grant section or otherwise of keeping track that, yes, we still have this other grant available to us.
Or you might just show all the grants we've won since we've been in business. It just as a total for the whole thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, it should be one sentence, I think what Dave's trying to get at is he wants to be recognized for the work staff has done over the years and the total amount. And that one chart shows it at the top and it has the total number up there. But maybe you don't want to put that whole chart in there because it takes up a whole page.
Well, I think we have a number of people in the watershed district who are aware that we're looking at the South Bone Lake land as a possible acquisition, and that this grant had been awarded, and it just isn't reflected in the report. it's just my thought, it's something we may want to acknowledge.
I think, you've heard me talking about getting more definition to that, capital savings account that we have. That's on the financials where all of that money aggregates. And breaking those out into the independent, these are all independent grants for specific projects. And so helping, I think, to make sure that's more transparent is we could just list those as separate sub areas of that big total that we keep in the savings account. And then the other thing that I think we could ask Emily to do is to have a carryover grant, maybe box where she can show when the grant was received, and then how much is still available in that grant for this particular year. The grants are usually for projects that go over the years. And so it would represent how much of that project is actually being implemented each year. So I think that would be more transparent and appropriate.
Well, I think Emily and Mike has an idea what some of the concerns are. Let them figure out what they want to do. There's a number of ways we can handle it, so.
And that's what we're doing, is talking about ways
Right,
to make
right.
it, to make it more transparent. So
Right, so-
we'll make 8:30. All right.
President
Anything
Anderson?
else, Emily, from, yes, Manager Taves?
I just wanted to call out the, get my glasses on here. That progress summary, the graphics in there, the use of color and the scaling, it made it so easy to read. I applaud that because that's turning data into good usable information. It was fun to go through and just observing the graphics and how colors use it, really simplified it for me. So good work on that, Emily.
Okay, any further comments?
I'll reiterate what everyone else said about the styling. If you look how this has improved over the last 4 or 5 years, it has really come up to the point where it's extremely professional now, so, and easy to read. So that's a real kudo. I did have one suggestion though, in the year in review. When I looked at this, we've got some of the key points are in lighter type. And to me, it was hard to see that. And my eye went to was to the darker type, which is more of a description, not the performance numbers that we want to emphasize. So I don't know, I think I would like to see that reversed in some way. Maybe you italicize it or underline it or something, just to make.
Why don't we let the staff figure that out?
Yes, right. Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm mentioning it right now. If you have some
Same
suggestions,
thing,
go ahead.
same thing. No.
The other question I had was that it's 2 pages and I'd like to see, I hate to see a blank page go to waste. And so this could be a nice handout for anybody in the watershed that could even pick up from the office. It's got all the information of what we've done in the year, but what can we have something that describes the watershed on the other side? Our mission statement or whatever you want to have on there that tells them who we are and what we're doing
As a handout.
as a handout.
Sure, we can give that to Adam and he can figure it out.
I think I asked about this last year, and there's some kind of requirement if it goes to the state, that it can only be 1 page, but that might be true, but we can make our own use, make it 2 pages, so people can use it in the public. And, you know, like for this meeting coming up at the Lake Association, this would be a great handout that's attached to the other 3 things that we want to give them. So just a thought.
I think it's a good idea. You know,
Or turn it in.
the more-
Return it into a
Or-
mailer.
Yeah, and turn it into a mailer. Yeah, we can talk to Adam about that.
Anyway, overall, great job again, Emily. I don't think anybody has as good a reporting system on these 3 items as we do. I think they're very, very, very well done, and I've always been impressed, and I'm impressed each year how it gets better too. That's really hard to do. So great job. Thank you.
Okay, next item, program and project update.
Madam President, managers, not sure,
Lane is here,
is there, okay, I can't see.
or he was.
Um,
I'm here.
There he is.
Why don't we put
Okay.
him up within the old business? Then he gets taken care of soon. Or new business. No, I guess we can't.
these are ongoing, so,
Yeah.
all right, Mr. Einiger, go take it away, please.
Thank you, Mike. Madam President, board members.
just wanted to give you a brief update on projects. I know we're creeping up on 8:30 here, so I'll be very brief. The main update is that we're making quite a bit of progress on the Heath Avenue Iron Hand sand filter. Things are rapidly evolving, and we're hoping to close on the property next week, Friday. With that, there's a bunch of different moving pieces. As far as getting signatures on documents, getting the payout amounts together, getting the money in place into escrow to close on the property. So all those things are coming together. We don't have all the answers yet, but it's building momentum, and we should have those answers quickly or here within the next couple of days. We'll be reaching out to board members who would be involved in the closing and getting everybody on the same page, getting the signatures needed, and then arranging transfer of funds and whatnot. So that is rapidly evolving. We should hopefully close on the 18th, and we already have EORs starting to work on the design for the project. So we are on time, within our timeline for implementation early 2026, spring, summer 2026 for the initial breaking ground. So that's the main update there. Otherwise, things are moving forward as we had hoped. A little bit of progress on all of the other projects that are indicated in the slide deck. Be happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
No.
No.
Very clear again. Thank you, Blaine.
Thanks, Blaine.
Thank you.
Cover all the aspects of each project, which is great.
We miss your partner, though.
Mike's got a question.
Dylan.
Madam President, managers, on the, back on the report there, but also in relationship to the project side, I don't know, I think we'll get it in the next board package, but, Emily, I meant to suggest that you include on the grant discussion, maybe just mentioning the two latest grant awards that the district was notified of this week. If you have those
Nice.
specifics. I know the one was around 35 and the other one's like 225,000, so.
Sure,
Future
I could.
projects coming up.
Yeah, go ahead, tell us.
Okay, Madam President, managers, yep, just in the last couple days, we got the award notifications on 2 grants that we submitted this year. The first is about $250,000 from a new grant program through the Board of Water and Soil Resources, the Green Infrastructure Program. I think this might be kind of a one-off program. I'd be surprised if they offered it again next year. It's kind of similar to Clean Water Fund, but different. But we applied to it, and we were able. It was us in South Washington Watershed District that got awarded on the Watershed District front, and the associated project that the $250,000 grant will go to is located just upstream of Comfort Lake, just kind of off the Sunrise River. Been working with the city of Wyoming to identify that. It's a kind of a stormwater treatment basin, would result in, I think, just a 5 pound per year phosphorus reduction, but also a few thousand pounds per year of sediment reduction as well. So we'll be moving forward with that. And then the other one is there is $35,000. It's through the Pollution Control Agency. This is the second grant we've gotten through this program. It's the Local Climate Action Planning Grant, and it is for shoreline resiliency. So, yep, lots of things in the works on that, and that's his high level summary.
Wonderful.
I have one other question.
Yes.
You had talked about before of making some suggestions on which lakes we want to put up for removing from impairment. I think we should make that decision tonight. So because it's very important that we get these impairments through and get the credit we deserve in terms of all the work that's gone into it. So I know like Shields probably is a higher risk right now because of that data point, but when I looked at the data, I thought that Comfort Lake and maybe Little Comfort would be 2 candidates perhaps. But maybe I think staff's in a better position to make that recommendation than we are, because you know where everything's buried in terms of issues. So, but I would like to see us at least move forward on 2 of them if we can. I'm just opening it up to the board for board comments.
Mhm.
Madam President, I think I'd like to, I mean, it was incorporated into the reports, and so I did. When we talked about it at the staff level, there's kind of two pieces, and I know this is kind of a longstanding guidance from the board. Just the facts, right? So so I said objectively, which ones actually meet the criteria, so that's been noted in there, and you can see it in the. You know, the top blue box in the report for each lake. And then, but we could also just look at either whether it's an anomaly or a continued trend. I do have some questions actually about 2014, because we went through a drier period prior to that, so we should look at that too. You know, and what that, you know, what that would hold, so. I mean, so I think it's, you know, we've offered an opinion within the report. I would like to hear some feedback from the board. We don't need to decide, I think, tonight, but we can have some discussion. I would like to look at how that 2014 looked, because we had about a 4 to 5 year dry period before that. And then that was a year which there was a lot of flooding, and probably the highest water I think I've ever seen to date on Bone Lake, for example, was that in 2014. So we can look at that, and then how did the lakes respond? So because we look at some of them, I mean, you know, they were still very impaired for some number of years, getting into past that, you know, what ended up into being about a 6-year wet cycle. So, but we don't have 2014 here to show us what it looked like immediately after, but. So we could do that and bring it back for further discussion. But. To your point, Manager Schmaltz, I think it'll be good to get some input from the board.
Yeah, we don't want to miss a year, I think, so we should.
Are you talking about the project management
No,
information? What are you talking about to identify those projects?
well,
Cause that looks like it's the one, but maybe not.
I'm just saying that for each of the, progress report. You know, at the top of each lake, or at the beginning of each discussion with the lakes is, well, before the table, I guess, it'll highlight then, you know, number one, water quality samples, and we'll say that it's met the criteria or hasn't. And then, you know, but there's a kind of a however, and then we can look specifically at the data. And the only suggestion I have is that if we're possible, we go back and look at 2014, because it would be a similar scenario of a wet year after a dry year, to see if, you know, how corollary it was. And then what the subsequent, what would we expect in subsequent years? If we had another wet year, but I mean, just looking at Little Cover, for example. You know, it wasn't meeting any of the criteria for all those 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. During wet years, very wet years, and so is that. So anyway, the longer, we do have, as somebody noted, a long record, you know, at the district, so we could. That would give us a little bit more information, I feel, from a scientific standpoint, and increase our confidence level upon the recommendation that we might, you know, move forward with.
Yeah, I had just looking at those, I had the same feeling, looking at dry years and wet years, and there's a correlation there, and I'm wondering how real everything is to a certain extent, so we need to take a look at that. Plus,
Well,
you
we
got the zebra mussels.
We already
in there also.
committed to doing that though.
Huh?
Earlier in the meeting, we did agree to that, having EOR go back and look at
Okay, right,
those corollary years. And, you know, make a judgment on climate impact.
and the other thing that, just to throw this out quickly, you know, zebra mussels is a thing that's brought up by the public also, so. We need to have some kind of an estimate of, if there's anything been published on this, what impact does zebra mussels really have on water quality? You know, I sent you a note on Curly
Right.
pondweed, 7 pounds per acre, you know, we've all forgot about that. When you're doing 100 acres and you're contributing 7 pounds per acre, that's a lot of phosphorus in the summertime. And that's why we had such terrible water around 4th of July parties. With all the dead weeds floating in and everything else, it was like a cesspool out there, so.
Well, right, and, you know, I mean, Bone Lake though is still within the standard of. And,
Yeah, there's no doubt about that one.
you know, and other improvements we've seen, you know, we don't have deeper mussels on those lakes.
Right.
And the other exception is Comfort Lake, but it's not like it's a high density, so. But there is, I think, general consensus that Comfort Lake could go forward for delisting. I think just because of the high confidence level.
Yeah, it looked really clean to me too. When I
Right,
looked at it.
and so, and the rest we can do some further discussion and.
And we could stop from it.
We will never stop working on that. Because
So we get the
we get-
last phosphorus out.
We get all the dredge from your lake. Okay, here we
Maybe the
go.
last 2.
Continue, to be continued. Okay, next, report of officers and managers. Mr. Baki, I'll start with you.
Yes, on March 31st, Manager Schmaltz and I met with Mr. Kinney as part of the first quarterly review. And we tabulated the information in the checklists. And Mr. Kinney is going to send that out to all managers, so you have a copy of it so you can review the SMART goals and what information was recorded there. Our next quarterly review will be at the end of June, and we'll have one at the end of September and one at the end of December to complete the quarterly review process. So we invite the other managers to consider participating in the process. We can only have 2 managers in attendance because of the quorum rules. But Mr. Kinney, if you could also send out dates, maybe for that first meeting in the end of June, a date that would work, we can get a manager to volunteer for that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm, thank you. Manager Taves.
Mine is just an observation of what's going on with these lakes. It's fun to watch the waterfowl coming back as they're moving north. The number of swans we've had this year has been pretty remarkable. Yesterday saw the first ospreys at the lake. That little pond now behind our barn, that was where that was excavated out. We had a rare kind of mallard in there that's got a blue head as opposed to the green head. It's a fairly rare bird, and it seems like they're nesting back there. So it's kind of fun to watch how this brings, you know, cleaning up the lakes is bringing back the more and more of the waterfowl.
Mhm. Manager Schmaltz?
Just to mention that the Forest Lake Association will be having their annual meeting April 17th, and as you know, we have a large audience here. It'll be bigger this year already. So, and then I'm working with Mike and staff, putting together what we hope is going to be a very strong presentation. So,
Is it at the high school?
no, it's at the American Legion Hall again.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, I think we had 150 people already reserved.
fantastic.
So
Okay,
that was last week.
I'd like to pop into those, so.
And
All right.
that starts at 5 o'clock, I guess. Well, 5:15, I think they start serving pizza,
Okay.
so you can get in as early as 5.
Should I make a meeting notice, like a quorum notice for that? If you are planning to go, just if Chris is there. as
Oh,
well.
sure, yeah, that's right, yeah, I suppose.
I don't think we're gonna be get together to talk about anything.
Just in case.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
The rules are the rules.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I went to the Wyoming City Council meeting, and they were discussing at their meeting early this month, the shallow pond donation from the Audubon Society. And it was very positive. They had positive things to say about working with the district, and knew that we would, they were very concerned about this trail that's on some high ground on one side of the pond, or the wetland area. And wanted, the citizens use it all the time, and they're very attached to it, and wanted to make sure that we wouldn't destroy that, and we said the opposite, of course, that's the business we're in, is protecting nature. And And so the administrator and the mayor had good things to say about working with us as well.
Good.
And I talked to them afterwards and, it's pretty conclusive that they're going to recommend that it come to us with the Audubon Society. And I know they've talked to Mike, the administrator, so fingers crossed, that's all gonna work out and we will be the proud owners of the Audubon Refuge. Forget what they call it, Conservancy, I think. But anyway, that'll be wonderful. And that's it. Is there,
Summary of and approval of board direction.
oh, yes, Chuck.
Yes,
Your
Madam Chair, managers. Not very much. What I have is regarding the 2024 annual report, discussion of representing the existing grant funds received in 2023 in something like a carryover grant box or presentation. Manager Schmaltz asked that the font colors in the year in review be reversed and that Mr. Helm look to incorporate a mission statement. And then Mr. Kinney will send out a date for the June personnel administrator review meeting to solicit a manager to join Manager Baki.
Is that everything that people remember?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Motion to adjourn is in order.
I'll move that we adjourn.
I'll second. I
Right.
was waiting for you, people. Okay.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Anderson.
Hi. Good night.
Yeah, good meeting, everyone.
It's
Thank you.
8:40 PM. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.